The journey begins at the crossing, where we come as we are, all of us, each of us in a different stage of our spiritual journey.
Regardless of the season of life, all are welcome here.
Young and old, different races, ethnicities, and cultural backgrounds.
Our purpose extends beyond ourselves. We exist for others.
Especially those who haven't been invited, those who haven't been cared for, and those who have walked away from God.
As one church, we partner with others as one family pushing towards the same thing. We believe that Jesus is the hope in a world of darkness, and through his church, the world will find light.
We know that Jesus wasn't just for a select few, but for everyone. So we have a vision.
To step out of our comfortable living to reach the searching, the broken, and the hurting. We have a deep desire to help people discover Jesus and the journey.
A desire to stand, united in a fight against darkness, being the church that Jesus has called us to be, knowing that we have been made to make a difference.
Welcome to the crossing.
Welcome to the crossing.
Well, welcome to the crossing, everybody. You know what time it is. It's time to stand to our feet. It's time to worship the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Lift our hearts, lift our hands, lift our voices this morning. We worship the God who was. We worship the God who is. We worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors. He parted the raging sea. My God, he holds the victory. Yes. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out the praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is shining in this place. And we won't be quiet. We shout out the praise. We shout out the praise. We sing to the God who heals. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause he hung up on that cross and he rose up from that grave. My God still rolling stones away. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out the praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is And God, we thank you that you go before us. God, that no matter what the trials we're facing, no matter what burdens we have, no matter what we're going through, that you go before us in the battle. And we do not need to be afraid of the future because you are the one that holds the future.
I have this confidence because I've seen the faithfulness of God. The still inside the storm, the promise of the shore. I trust the power of your word, enough to seek the kingdom first, beyond the barren place, beyond the ocean waves. When I walk through the water, I won't be overcome. When I go through the rivers, I will not be drowned. My God will make a way, so I am not afraid. You keep the promises you made. There isn't one that is the name, so I will not lose heart. Here I will lift my arms and start to sing into the night. My praise will call the sun to rise, declare the battle won, declare it is done.
Those are such powerful words this morning, God, that we do not need to be afraid of what our future is, because God, you are holding the future. Not only are you holding the future, but you are walking with us, and you are traveling with us through our journeys, God, through our ups and our downs. You can have a seat this morning. Well, right now we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to carve out some time in our service to reflect on the sacrifice that God made in the giving of his son, Jesus Christ. And if you are a believer in Jesus this morning, this time is a very special time for you, because we're going to take the communion sacraments together. And if you don't have those, we have them at the back of the room. You can slip back and grab it, come back to your seat, also at the sides of the room. But we want to quiet our hearts. There's so much that goes on in our week. Can you imagine what happens between Sunday and Sunday? If you go back and write everything down, there's so much that goes on, so much life happens. But we get to come in here, we get to worship, sing songs, lift our voices and lift our hearts to God. But then what I love that we get to do here at the Crossing is take communion. And we do this alongside millions of other Christians throughout time, throughout the last 2,000 years that have been doing the same thing that we're getting ready to do. And they're reflecting on the love of God. They're reflecting on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and what that means for us. Because it states in John 3:16, a very powerful scripture, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believeth in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. And that everlasting life is for you as a believer. It's for me as a believer. And we are humbled by that thought this morning. So if you have your communion, let's take it out. We're going to take the bread together that represents the body of Jesus Christ that was broken, that was beaten, that was bruised because of his love for you. And the juice that represents the blood that was spilled freely so that you could be redeemed back to our Father in heaven. So this morning, take it when you're ready. Take some time to thank God for Jesus and what he did. You can take it when you're ready. And if the cross brings transformation, I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just the doorway into resurrection life. And if I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, my song will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, be magnified in me. Yes, yes. This morning, that is our prayer. God, that your Son, Jesus, would be magnified in our lives. That when people encounter us, they actually encounter you, Jesus. That's our prayer. Would you form us? Would you speak to our hearts? Would you change us from the inside out? Would you make us more like your Son, your precious Son, Jesus? God, we love you. We thank you for this time of communion this morning, reflection on your great love, the sacrifice that you made. We're thankful that we can sing songs, that we can lift our hands, that we can lift our hearts. We can be reminded of how good you are and the promises that you always keep and never break. God, thank you for going with us in the storms. God, thank you for being right there in the good times. We love you, and we thank you, and we're grateful. In Jesus' name. And God's people said, amen. Can we give God some claps this morning? Some praise. Woo! Yeah. Yes. God is so good. So good. Well, it is good to be here with you today. It's a hot one out there, you guys. It is so hot. I don't know what's happening right now, but woo! You made it to church. You get extra brownie points. Even your cars made it in the heat, so they get brownie points too. Before we get into the service, why don't you turn to your neighbor, let him know you're glad to see him today, and then you can have a seat.
What does it mean to get a new pair of shoes?
It means to me, it makes me happy. When I go back to school, I love my new shoes because they look awesome and cool, and I would love to wear them every day. When I have new shoes, I feel happy. New shoes are important for school because we will get glass in our feet. I like new shoes because they're cool.
When my old shoes get old and stuff, they cut up the back of my heels, but when I get new shoes, they don't.
I feel fast and tight with my new shoes. New shoes make me happy. Getting new shoes makes me feel happy because I know that my feet are going to feel comfortable. When I get new shoes, it makes me excited because I get to show my friends at school.
Hey there, Crossing. So glad you are joining us online. I'm Scott. I'm one of the pastors here. I just want to welcome you, especially if you're here for the first time today. We would love to get to know you a little bit. If you wouldn't mind, just click on the link or hit up the QR code in the bottom of the screen. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We'd love to find out more about who you are and what's going on in your life, but also we'd love to tell you a little bit about what we're doing here and help you maybe take some next steps to get more involved. Speaking of being involved, we've actually got something super exciting coming up here very, very soon. We are doing a shoe drive. I know it's 190 degrees out and it feels like the fall is never gonna come, but I promise you, it is coming, and with the fall will be the beginning of the school season again. And listen, we've got families all around the valley that can't afford to give their kids shoes. And here's the thing, man, you remember what it was like to be a kid going back to school. Shoes matter. It helps you just feel more confident and better as you're beginning the school year. So we want to help these kids get off on the right foot. See what I did there? And so we want to help them get off on the right foot by giving them some new shoes. And so we're doing a shoe drive, and there's two ways that you can take care of that. One is if you're just living online all the time, that's awesome. There is a link you can click on, or you can go to crossinglv.com/shoe drive, and you can actually give cash. Or the other option is if you're going to be at any one of our campuses on July 14th, then you can actually bring shoes to any of our campuses. We'll be collecting them at every campus. And here's the thing about the shoes. Make sure they're good shoes. None of the cheap knockoff stuff. Something you'd want for yourself, some Vans, some Adidas, some Nikes, something good, all right? And then by bringing those together or by giving money towards those, we will work with our local partners to get those distributed to kids and families in need. Sizes, adult and teen sizes 3 through 11 would be prime. And so if you could do that, that would be spectacular. And here's the thing. We don't mind asking you guys for stuff because you have proven that you are generous, that you guys give sacrificially all the time. And so we're so grateful for that. If it wasn't for your sacrificial giving, we wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff that we do around here locally and globally. And so if you're not already partnered with us financially, I just want to encourage you to do that. There's lots of easy ways to give you can see on the screen. I would encourage you to be part of what God is doing at this place through these people, but also to experience what God can do in your life when you are generous. Well, we're about to start our last message of the series on David, and it's fantastic. But I also want to tell you that next week we are beginning a brand new series called Caves, where we're going to be looking at how God meets us in our times of need and some of our darkest times. And so you don't want to miss that. Maybe even invite someone else to join you. Well, we're about to kick off. Here we go. It's going to be a great day.
Well, we're so excited to have you join us online today. We're excited about the series that we are in, where we are looking at the life of David. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but my wife and I recently had decided and set aside a weekend that we were going to go and just relax and replenish. We were going to go to the beach. We were going to have all kinds of activities, eat some good meals. It was an exciting weekend that we had kind of placed on the calendar and circled the dates. Unfortunately, when we got to that particular weekend and we arrived at our destination, the weather was not agreeable. Rain, wind, sideways rain, cold. It was not great. We had stayed at a hotel that was designed just basically to sleep and to shower and to go out and to be a part of the fun of that place that we were, and it really wasn't going to work out. To make matters worse, we got a phone call while we were there, and we had some family issues, and we had some things we had to deal with, so that started stressing us out. Maybe you've had one of those incidents or one of those moments where you had planned something to be amazing and happy, but in the end, it got messy. For us, what was supposed to be a weekend of happy became messy. It wasn't what we dreamed about. That type of moment probably does not surprise you. I would imagine you've had those type of experiences as well. Maybe you're watching this and you are in the midst of one right now. Well, we're in this series surrounding the life of David. Today, we're going to be reminded of something through his life that very few of us actually need to be reminded of. And it's this, that life rarely goes as planned. I know some of you are planners. Plans are good. I'm married to a planner. Everybody needs one. But no matter how much we run the plan, eventually reality always wins. Plans are great, but reality is greater. Here's what I know that you know. Things don't always turn out as planned. The two of you may not live every day happily ever after. You may never walk your daughter down the aisle. You may never have to purchase a high chair. The second marriage is potentially starting to feel like the first one. That prodigal son or daughter looks like they may not be coming home. You aren't getting into that school, reality says. It looks like money may always be tight. Looks like that dream job may not be a dream job after all. And depending on what you've been taught or what you've learned, what religion you may have been exposed to, or the church you grew up in, there may be a sense of panic that is setting in because of those realities. Because you may have been told or you may have been taught that our faith is a cause and effect. I love predictable outcomes. We all do. We love the idea that if we do A, then B will happen. I'm not really sure where that idea crept into our Christian faith, but it has. And reality says that idea is destructive, and it's very confusing. Here's why. Because it forces us to try and explain away our circumstances that we really honestly can't explain. We might describe it as an if-then situation. You feel like God promised you, or you may be watching today, and if you're honest and candid, you believe that God owes you. I mean, you played by the rules. You did everything that you were supposed to do. You waited, you raised them right, you behaved. So your thought is, isn't there cause and effect? Doesn't A equal B? Isn't there sowing and reaping? You did everything right, and now it's looking like your dream can't or won't come true. The outcomes you thought were guaranteed are currently not happening. And what may be making it even worse is, in fact, it looks like everybody else's dream is going to happen but yours. So, with that in mind, we're going to look today at David's life to help us answer this question. The question is, what do we do when our dreams don't come true? What do we do when that happy weekend becomes messy? What do we do when those things in our life don't work and turn out as planned? Things don't always turn out as planned because of even what other people do. Now, here's the context or the backstory. When David was in his 20s, David had a plan that he realized wasn't going to become true, at least in the way he thought, because of this crazy king, Saul. He found himself on the run in the wilderness, and a few times during that season, he panicked. And every time he panicked, there were consequences. But during that period, he learned the lesson that would stretch into his later years as king. Sometimes things don't turn out as planned because of something we do, right? About 22 years after that point, David became king. We'll call that 30K. And then when he was approximately 51 years old after king, right? 21 years after he became king, we have an incident that you may or may not be familiar with a woman named Bathsheba. He has this encounter with Bathsheba. For those who need a refresher, David at this point, he's 51 years old. He's been king for over 20 years. He sent his men off to war. But for whatever reason, he stayed back. And one night, he sees Bathsheba from his place bathing. And then he's so enthralled with her that he enters into an affair with her. This affair likely lasted more than just one night. At some point, she becomes pregnant. When he finds out, David panics, and he tries to get his husband Uriah to spend time with her, but he refuses. So David has Uriah sent into battle, sent to the front line, and he's killed. And then David takes Bathsheba as his wife. And there's this thing where he actually thinks for a period of time that he got away with it. But here's the deal. Every sin comes prepackaged with a consequence. And he's eventually confronted by the prophet Nathan, who's his advisor. And this advisor says this to him. His advisor says, "This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household, I'm going to bring calamity on you." Ouch. Verse 12. "You did this in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all of Israel." He says this, because you are the leader, you are accountable to the entire kingdom. And because of that, I'm going to bring consequences that everyone is going to know about. Wow. And so David breaks down and he recognizes, realizes, and confesses his sin. It says this, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. This is a reminder for all of us that even though he was king, and even though he was flawed, he never confused who was truly in charge. And when he realized his sin and surrendered to the will of God, that was an important and crucial moment for him. But here's the part I need you to hear. Even though God forgives, and in his grace he does, there are still unavoidable consequences to our sin. And part of this is what your expectations were, what your hopes potentially were, what your desires were. Sometimes when we get ourselves into this sinful situations, those things go away. They can't happen anymore. So a year goes by after Bathsheba's incident, after David confesses and nothing happens. 2 years go by, 3 years go by, and it seems like there are no consequences. But soon, these consequences would take hold, and it's going to turn David's world upside down. And at the end of this story, many of the dreams that he had for his life actually can't come true. So we fast forward to after King 24, Amon. Amon was David's oldest son and was destined to become the next king of Israel. But he had this really strange thing. He was consumed with lust for his half-sister Tamar. It's a complicated and very messy story. But eventually, he lures her to his house, and when she resists his advances, he rapes her. And as soon as this is over, the account tells us this. Then Amon hated her. The love and the lust quickly turned to hate. He hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. And Amon said to her, "Get up and get out." What a mess. And when David finds out, he is furious. He's so furious that he responds by doing absolutely nothing. We're not sure why, but through this season of his life, he didn't do anything. He didn't bring any consequences. Perhaps he had lost the moral authority after what had transpired with Bathsheba. But all we know is he did nothing. Tamar is disgraced because everyone knows what happens. So then entering the scene is Absalom. Absalom is David's third son, who was Tamar's full brother. And he takes her in after this incident, and he cares for her. And so fast forward to after King 26. This is when Absalom really comes into the story. The second son had passed away, and Absalom is actually David's favorite son. He is now next in line to be king after Amnon. And he does nothing about Amnon's behavior with Tamar. Absalom does nothing for a year, for 2 years. So Amnon's got to be thinking, I did this thing, I sinned, but nothing seems to be happening. But when everybody thinks we've moved on, Absalom throws a party and he invites all his brother. This is where the story gets kind of crazy, so you need to track. Because in the middle of the party, Amnon had had too much to drink, and Absalom has his men kill Amnon in front of the entire family to avenge his sister and the rape that transpired. And all the other brothers flee to Jerusalem, and Absalom flees north to what is now we know as Syria. And when King David finds out that his oldest son has been murdered by his favorite son, he is furious. But he does nothing. Life goes on. I'm just thinking about it. Isn't this story crazy as you observe it today? I mean, it is beyond what many of us experience, way beyond, I hope. But in some small ways, we can relate to the drama, perhaps, in our own families or our own worlds. So now, we're 9 years after David became king, and we experience what's known as Absalom's rebellion. After 3 years of being in exile in Syria, Absalom is finally invited back to Jerusalem. But while he's there in Jerusalem, David, his father, refuses to see him or even welcome him back, and their relationship is now permanently broken. Eventually, Absalom is so hurt and angry, he puts a plan in place to overthrow David, his father, as king. He does it by finding a soft spot in David's leadership with the people. And he steps into that relational soft spot. Here's what he would do. He would get up early every day, and he would meet the people as they were coming in from the outskirts and coming into the city. And there he would stand, and he would provide advice and counsel and kindness. And he would give them hope. And they saw Absalom, and they were never able to go and to see King David. He was too busy. He was too isolated. And Absalom begins winning over the hearts of the people by standing in the gap for them. What he was basically doing, he was running a campaign for king without all the commercials and the political flyers that we're used to. Plus, Scripture tells us he was something to look at. It says this, in all Israel there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. He looked good. And from the top of his head to the sole of his feet, there was no blemish in him. Attractive young man, giving advice, being kind, filling the gap. Eventually, word begins to spread that Absalom is going to be king. In fact, Absalom encouraged the people to begin spreading the word that he is now actually king. And people believe it because he had won their hearts, and they rejoiced when he heard it. So now David's world is getting turned upside down. His firstborn has been murdered by his favorite son, and now they are on the brink of civil war. It says this, finally a messenger came and told David, the hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. And so now, 31 years after becoming king, David flees. David flees. And Here's where we see the heart of David. David was probably not surprised. It says, then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the entire city to the sword. So David had been in the wilderness while crazy King Saul was king, and now he finds himself on the run again. David has to flee. He abandons the throne, he escapes the city, and he goes back out into the countryside. Once again, he is a fugitive. He finds himself running from his own home, running from his son and those who loved him. And where we are in this moment is we get a sad picture of David. It actually tells us that his head is covered as he leaves. He's weeping, he's barefoot. What a sight to see. He's not even sure exactly where he's going. But this time, he's not 22 years old running from Saul. He's now 61 years old. This was not the dream. This was not supposed to happen. This was not the way he was supposed to spend the latter seasons of his life. This was not what he expected. His dreams were not coming through, and as it turns out, they could not come through. And when we read this, there we often are. Maybe you're there today. There I am. There you are. This is where, once again, our lives intersect with the story of David. Because in many cases, when we thought we were going to be happy and content, instead we find ourselves heartbroken, frustrated, angry, even disappointed with God. Maybe you're in this moment where you're looking for someone to blame. Maybe you've decided to point the blame this direction and blame God. After all, where is God? Couldn't God have kept this from happening? What's the point of going on, you might be asking? What is the point of even trying? You may even be thinking, God, I've hung in there with you. God, you hung in there with him or her year after year after year. And now look what she did. Look what he's done. You waited and you waited and you waited for what? You raised him right. You raised her right. You're just, it's all coming out. You don't deserve to be treated like this. And look at the way he's treating you. Look at how she's treating you. You were honest, you think. You think, I was honest, I was good. And if I was honest, I believe that good things were happening. But you were honest, and unfortunately, you lost that job. You worked hard, but it hasn't really worked out. This is the point where we have to pause. Because I know I'm painting a pretty dark picture, but there is where, at this moment, we can do more damage to ourselves. Because we're so angry and hurt and frustrated with God. We can hurt ourselves, create more debt, create more pain. But this isn't the first time that David has faced this situation. We are now dealing with 61-year-old David as opposed to 21-year-old David. This is the second time he's found himself on the run in the wilderness, his dreams derailed, his expectations unmet. Now, he's in what I would call the autumn years of his life. I don't know if you know this, but life seems to have seasons, you know. I put my own parameters on them. They're just mine. You may have your own. But like, you know, the idea that when we're born and then about age 25 is kind of that spring season where things grow and things are exciting. And then summer, 25 to 50, I mean, life is hot. We're working hard. We're pushing through. We're grinding. We're going. 50 to 75, kind of that autumn where, you know, starting to fade a little bit. But we're still vibrant and there's still life in us. And then 75 plus, that idea of winter, that last season of our life. Everything beyond that is deep winter. Some of you are thinking it's really cold and snowy right now where I am. Listen, I'm a big fan of autumn. We don't have a lot of indicators here in Vegas, but I still love when the weather changes and the evenings get cooler and the leaves that we have, the few that we have, start reflecting some of those orange and yellow colors that indicate that we are in fall. But I realize that at my age, today I'm navigating and beginning to navigate the autumn of my own life. I've come to understand that life's compost and seeds, it seeds us even as autumn does the earth. I've seen how possibilities get planted in us even in the hardest of times. So I'm enjoying this fall season. You might be seeing it too. How the job you lost now in this season has pushed you to find work that was more meaningful. Maybe in the spring of your life, you saw the road closed sign and it turns you towards a new direction that now you're so glad you traveled. Maybe you're in that season where the losses you felt like you couldn't recover from forced you to now find new sources of meaning in what was left over from that loss. But in the midst of all the falling, the seeds of new life are always being gently sown. I love this poem by William Yates that captures this season for me of autumn and where David was in his life this autumn season. It says this: though leaves are many, the root is one. Through all the lying days of my youth, when I fool myself, I swayed my leaves and flowers in the sun. Now may I wither into the truth. Coming to terms with the sole truth of who I am, with my complex and confusing mix of darkness and light, that requires a shrinking ego and a greater perspective of God's presence, no matter what season of life you may be in. But listen, nothing shrivels a person better than age. It forces you to face yourself honestly. And this is where we find David as he hides out in the wilderness, withering into the truth. He gets it. And in the midst of this crisis later in life, David does and says something that is remarkable and notable. Here's what happened. Zadok, the high priest, was there with him, leaving the city, and the Ark of the Covenant, which is the most sacred thing, was accompanying them. The Ark of the Covenant represented the presence of God to ancient Israel. It was as close as you could get to God. If you took it, they believed that if you took it into battle, you were assured of winning. So those who had the ark had God's presence and power. When the people in the city saw the ark leaving, it looked as though the presence of God was actually leaving as well and going with David. But the implications of that image felt manipulative to David. So he said this to Zadok. He said, take the ark of God and take it back into the city. This would have made the people with him that were leaving with him, that were loyal to him, crazy and nervous. They believed in the cause and effect of the ark. They believed if we have the ark, he said, if we have the ark, that we'll do what we need, God will do what we need him to do. It says, here's David's explanation. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he said, he will bring me back and let me see it, the ark, and all his dwelling place again. But if he says, I'm not pleased with you, then I'm ready. I'm okay with that. Then these are the words I want you to capture as you're watching today. Let him do to me whatever seems good. Whatever seems good to him. Summary, not my will, but his will. Listen, every time I choose to do my thing, my own thing outside of God, I mess things up. I get in the way. David lost his world, but what's great is even as he's in this broken state, it's just amazing to watch that he did not lose his faith or confidence in God. He understands his flaw. He's coming to grips with his flaw in his season of life, but he refuses to be the king and knows he is just a king. David was not taking matters into his own hands. He said about God, the king, let him do to me what seems good to him. And if you follow the rest of the story, David actually would eventually return as king, sadly. But it would cost him his son's life, and his world would never be the same. And 9 years later, David died. This entire story of this flawed life of David, who is a hero and a man after God's own heart, there's such an authenticity in this account of David's life. We get to see David, and through this series, all of his failures and his flaws and his victories. With all of his flaws, though, he never lost his confidence in God. Whether things didn't go right because of his behavior, see Bathsheba, or the behaviors of others, see Amnon and Absalom. His somewhat less than stellar ending of his life reminds us of something very important, though. The foundation of our faith is not answered prayer or happily ever after endings. It's hard, but it's always a mistake to wrap our faith in God around the fulfillment of our dreams or even the answers to our prayers the way we expect. Dreams that don't come true, prayers that don't get answered in our way, says nothing about God's presence, his goodness, his faithfulness, or even his lack of movement or activity. David would be quick to remind us that we are mistaken if and when we feel forsaken. To assume from circumstances that God is not real or not present, David says, don't make that mistake. Don't do that. David said, I may lose my world, but I will not lose my confidence in God. We need to understand that everything David experienced, self-inflicted and otherwise, his perspective was not my will, but God's will. Not if, then he will, but rather if, there he is. He is there. No matter what, there he is. He is there. Why? Because there is this deep sense of true faith that says he is there. When I get promoted, he's there. When I get fired, he's there. When I have to shop at Savers, he's there. When I get to shop at Costco, he is there. In every season of life, he is there. The presence of God is his preeminent promise. I will not lose my faith in him. You need to make that determination, even though it seems as if God has potentially abandoned me. Psalmist says this, which is David, in you, Lord my God, I put my trust, my hope is in you all day long, in the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to conclude by telling you a story. Some good friends of mine, the Huey family, David and Danielle Huey, they were about to have a child, the excitement of being a new parent and finding out that they were going to add to their family. But unfortunately, in this particular moment, they found out a couple of months before the birth was scheduled that it looked like their baby, through a series of tests, had Down syndrome. David told me when he related the story, he said, I believed God would be a healer in that moment. He said, I really believed. He actually went on a 40-day fast, which nearly killed him. And they had gathered friends and family and had hundreds of people that joined him for part of that fast along the way. And after all the fasting and all the prayer, she was born healthy, but with Down syndrome. And initially, David became frustrated. He was embittered with God over what seemed to be the lack of answered prayers. He felt like he had done everything according to Scripture, right? He'd asked, he'd knocked, he'd prayed, he'd fasted. He truly believed. This was no mustard faith moment, he related to me. It was a watermelon-sized faith. And he said he was never upset that she had Down syndrome. He was actually more upset that he felt like God had lied and failed. He felt like for a season that God was no longer trustworthy. But David told me that slowly that changed as he realized it may not have been how he pictured it, but God was still faithful. He began to realize and recognize that truly Emma was faithfully and wonderfully made. In fact, she is perfect. And now she's a teenager, and they named her Emma Joy Huey, because Emma from the German means whole and complete, and joy as she is their joy. Because from their story, we know this, that no matter what you're experiencing today, what the circumstances, the expectations that have not been met, the dreams that have been crushed, the happy ending that's now gotten messy, you can go with the confidence, as David did, as the Hueys did, as we all do, as we walk in faith, that he is there. Let me pray for you today, wherever you're watching. God, thank you for this time that we can spend in pausing and across our online community, that we can sense and feel what you're doing in us. God, this is a hard concept. It's a hard truth for us to process. God, we know that you are good, but many times it's tough in the circumstances that are difficult to cling to that. God, I pray that you would strengthen those that are feeling that. God, those that are listening today and they are at the edge, maybe they've given up, but they're going to grab you again. Maybe they're holding on with just the last bit of strength. God, I pray that today you would just encourage them. Help them to see that you are present, that you are there. Help them to see through the life of David, the flawed hero, that he believed truly, even as his family imploded around him and his leadership was lost and the things that he had imagined didn't completely work out. God, I pray that we would know that our trust in you, that you have our best interests in mind, and that you work in and through us. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Hey, we're so glad you're able to join us here today. Just want to remind you of two things. One is we're starting that brand new series on caves next week. You don't want to miss that. And also the shoe drive on the 14th. Look forward to seeing you then. Well, we'll see you next week. Take care. Hey there, Crossing. So glad